Captain David Rodriguez stared at the massive viewing screen in the command center of Unity Station. The images streaming across it made his stomach turn. Earth's once mighty fleet was nothing more than floating debris now. Its ships that had taken years to build were reduced to twisted metal in mere hours. The war with the Zephyrians had lasted 3 brutal years, and humanity was losing badly. "Sir, we're getting a communication from the Zephyrian flagship," Lieutenant Kim announced from her station. Her voice shook slightly. Everyone knew what Zephyrian communications usually meant: surrender demands. David walked closer to the screen, his boots echoing in the eerily quiet command center. Put it through. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that took everyone's breath away. The Zephyrian queen stood before them, and she was unlike anything they had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow with an inner light, like starlight trapped beneath crystal. Her eyes shifted colors like distant galaxies, and when she moved, it was with a grace that seemed to defy physics. "I am Queen Zara of the Zephyrian Empire," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made the translation devices struggle. "I wish to speak with your highest-ranking diplomat." David stepped forward. "I'm Captain Rodriguez, Earth's chief ambassador to this sector. What do you want?" The Queen tilted her head, studying him with those impossible eyes. "Captain Rodriguez, your people are brave. They fight well, even when defeat is certain. This impresses my council. If you're here to demand our surrender, just get on with it," David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Something that might have been a smile crossed the Queen's luminous features. "I am not here for your surrender, Captain. I am here with a proposal that could save both our peoples." David felt his heart skip. "What kind of proposal? A marriage?" Queen Zara said simply. "Between you and me?" The command center fell silent. David was sure he had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "In Zephyrian culture, marriage is the highest form of diplomatic bond. It's more sacred than any treaty, more binding than any contract. If I were to marry a human representative, it would signal to my people that humans are worthy of respect and protection." David's mind raced. "You're talking about a fake marriage? Political stunt?" "Call it what you wish," the Queen replied. "But it would end this war. Your people would live. Mine would gain a valuable ally. The alternative is the complete destruction of Earth within the next solar cycle." Lieutenant Kim leaned over to David. "Sir, our intelligence suggests she's telling the truth. The Zephyrian fleet is massive. We can't win this fight." David looked back at the Queen. "Why me? Why not someone more important? You have proven yourself honorable in battle. You have shown mercy to our wounded. You speak for Earth in this sector. That is enough." She paused, those galaxy eyes seeming to look right through him. "Also, I have been watching you, Captain Rodriguez. You are not like the others who seek power for its own sake. You genuinely care about your people." "And what exactly would this marriage involve?" David asked. "A ceremony according to our customs. You would need to learn our sacred vows, participate in our rituals. To my people, it would appear as a true union. To yours, it would be a diplomatic necessity." David felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. Every person on Earth, every human colony, every child who might never see their next birthday, they all depended on his decision. "I need time to think about this," he said. "Time is something neither of us has." "Much of," Queen Zara replied. "My war council grows impatient. There are those among my people who believe humans should be wiped out entirely. This marriage would be my way of protecting you from them." "Why do you want to protect us?" David asked. "We're your enemies." For a moment, the Queen's composed. Mask slipped, and David saw something he hadn't expected. Sadness. "Because I have studied your species, Captain. I have seen your art, your literature, your music. I have watched how you care for your young, how you sacrifice for each other. Your species has beauty that should not be lost to the universe." David closed his eyes, thinking of his sister back on Earth, of the children in the schools, of the artists and dreamers and ordinary people just trying to live their lives. When he opened them again, he had made his decision. "I'll do it," he said. The Queen nodded solemnly. "Then we must begin preparations immediately." The ceremony will be broadcast to both our peoples. You will need to learn our ways quickly." Over the next few days, David found himself in a crash course in Zephyrian culture. Their customs were ancient and complex, full of ritual and meaning that he struggled to understand. The queen herself taught him, showing patience he hadn't expected. "Your people value individual choice above all else," she explained as they practiced the ceremonial movements. "My people value harmony and collective good. The marriage ritual reflects this. It is about to becoming one, not for personal happiness, but for the good of all." "And you're okay with that?" David asked. "Giving up your personal happiness for politics?" The queen was quiet for a long moment. "Personal happiness is a luxury that rulers rarely enjoy, Captain. I have always known my life would be spent in service to my people." As the day of the ceremony approached, David found himself studying the queen more carefully. She was incredibly intelligent, speaking dozens of languages fluently. She was also lonely. He could see it in the way she stood apart from her advisors, in the careful way she chose her words. The ceremony itself was unlike anything David had ever experienced. It took place in the queen's personal chambers, a vast space filled with crystals that hummed with energy. The walls seemed to be made of living light, and the air itself sparkled, with microscopic particles that danced around them. David wore traditional Zephyrian robes that felt strange against his skin. The queen wore a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. As they spoke the ancient vows, David found himself caught up in the moment. The words, even in translation, were beautiful and profound. "I bind my life to yours," he said, following the script he had memorized. "I bind my soul to yours," she replied as they completed the final ritual. Something unexpected happened. David felt a strange tingling sensation, as if some invisible thread was connecting him to the queen. For just a moment, he could swear he felt her emotions, her relief, her hope, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The ceremony was broadcast across both empires, and the response was immediate. The Zephyrian fleet began withdrawing from human space. Trade negotiations began. The war was over. But as David looked into Queen Zara's eyes at the end of the ceremony, he realized something that frightened him more than any battle. The connection he felt wasn't just political or strategic. For the first time in his life, he was genuinely attracted to someone who was completely beyond his reach. The queen seemed to sense his thoughts. "The ritual affects some people more than others," she said quietly. "Do not be concerned. The feelings will fade." But even as she said it, David could see in her eyes that she was lying. The feelings wouldn't fade for either of them. And that was going to make their fake marriage a lot more complicated than anyone had planned. The war was over, but for David and Queen Zara, the real challenge was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the wedding ceremony that shocked both galaxies. David Rodriguez found himself living a double life that he never could have imagined. One day he was on Earth, attending meetings with government officials who treated him like a hero. The next day he was on Luminara, the crystal capital of the Zephyrian Empire, playing the role of devoted husband to an alien queen. The peace was holding, barely. Trade ships moved freely between human and Zephyrian space for the first time in decades. Scientists from both species worked together on projects that seemed impossible just months before. Children on Earth were learning about Zephyrian culture in school, while young Zephyrians studied human history with curious fascination. But David could feel the tension beneath the surface. Not everyone was happy about the peace. Captain Rodriguez. General Harrison called out as David walked through the corridors of Earth's Central Command. "We need to talk." David followed the general into a secure briefing room. The older man's face was grim, his gray hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "How long do you think this charade can last?" Harrison asked bluntly. "It's working," David replied. "The war is over. People are alive who would otherwise be dead. People are also asking questions," Harrison said, pulling up a holographic display. "Social media is buzzing with speculation about your relationship with the Queen. Some are calling you a traitor. Others think you're being brainwashed." David studied the display, seeing news headlines that made his stomach twist. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Be more convincing," Harrison said. "Or be less convincing. Pick one. Its middle ground is making everyone nervous." The truth was, David was nervous too. Every visit to Luminara made his situation more complicated. Queen Zara wasn't at all what he had expected when he first agreed to the marriage. She was brilliant, spending hours each day reading reports from across her empire and making decisions that affected billions of lives. She was also surprisingly funny, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. "Your human coffee is terrible," she had said during his last visit, making a face as she sipped from a cup he had brought. "It tastes like burned plant matter." "That's exactly what it is," David had replied, laughing. "That's the point." "Your species is very strange," she had said, but she was smiling when she said it. These moments of connection were becoming more frequent, and David wasn't sure how to handle them. The queen was supposed to be his political ally, nothing more. But when she showed him the palace gardens where she grew earth flowers in alien soil, he found himself genuinely moved by her efforts to understand his world. "I study your species," she had explained, kneeling beside a patch of roses that somehow bloomed in the purple light of Luminara's twin suns. "These flowers are beautiful, but they require such specific conditions. Like humans themselves, fragile, but capable of extraordinary beauty when properly cared for." David had watched her tend the flowers with careful hands, and for a moment, he forgot she was an alien queen. She was just a woman who liked gardens and was trying to build bridges between two very different worlds. But not everyone appreciated those bridges. During his next visit to Luminara, David witnessed a heated argument between Queen Zara and one of her generals. The Zephyrian language was musical, but could become harsh when emotions ran high. "What was that about?" David asked, after the general had stormed out. "General Thane believes I am making a mistake," Queen Zara replied, her usual composure slightly shaken. "He thinks the peace makes us look weak. He says other species will see our mercy toward humans as an invitation to attack us." "What do you think?" "I think strength that cannot show mercy is not strength at all," she said. "It is fear wearing a mask." David found himself admiring her wisdom, even as he worried about her safety. If her own generals were questioning her decisions, how long before they questioned her right to rule? His concerns proved justified when news reached him of increased military activity in the outer sectors of Zephyrian space. Ships were moving in patterns that suggested preparation for conflict, not peace. "Someone is planning something," Lieutenant Kim reported during a secure communication. "Our intelligence suggests there's a faction within the Zephyrian military that wants to restart the war." David felt a chill run down his spine. Do they know about this on Luminara? We're not sure. Communications with the Queen's inner circle have been limited lately. That night, David couldn't sleep. He found himself thinking about Queen Zara, wondering if she was safe, if she knew about the threat growing within her own empire. The thought of something happening to her created a knot of anxiety in his chest that he didn't want to examine too closely. When he finally did return to Luminara, he found the palace in subtle but noticeable lockdown. Security was tighter, and the Queen's usual warmth seemed strained. "There have been threats," she admitted when he asked. "Nothing specific, but my intelligence advisors are concerned." "About what?" "About us," she said simply. "About what our marriage represents. There are those who believe I have become too influenced by human thinking. As they say, I have forgotten what it means to be Zephyrian." David felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, human or Zephyrian." She looked at him with those galaxy eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them that went beyond their political arrangement. "Thank you, David. That means more to me than you know." It was the first time she had used his first name, and the sound of it in her musical voice made something flutter in his chest. He realized with growing alarm that his feelings for her were becoming very real, very complicated, and very dangerous. The danger became clear 3 days later when an explosion rocked the palace during a diplomatic dinner. David threw himself over Queen Zara as debris rained down around them, his only thought being to protect her from harm. As security forces secured the area, David found himself holding the Queen close, both of them shaking from the shock. When she looked up at him, her eyes were wide with something that looked like fear, not for herself, but for him. "You could have been killed," she whispered. So could you, he replied, not moving away from her. I am expendable, she said. Queens can be replaced, but you. If something happened to you, the peace would shatter. Both our peoples would suffer. David knew she was lying. He could see it in her eyes, feel it in the way she trembled against him. She wasn't worried about the peace or their peoples. She was worried about him personally and specifically. And that's when he realized the truth that terrified him more than any explosion. Queen Zara was falling in love with him just as he was falling in love with her. Their fake marriage was becoming real, whether they wanted it to or not. And in a universe where their love could be seen as weakness by some and treason by others, that was the most dangerous thing of all. As they pulled apart, both trying to regain their composure, David caught sight of General Thane watching from across the room. The expression on the Zephyrian's face was cold and calculating. The explosion hadn't been random. Someone was testing their defenses, their relationship, their resolve. And David had a sinking feeling that the real battle for their future was just beginning. After the explosion at the palace, everything changed. Queen Zara insisted that David stay on Luminara for his own safety, but both of them knew the real reason. They could no longer pretend that their relationship was just political theater. The fear they had felt when they thought they might lose each other had exposed the truth neither wanted to admit. David found himself living in the royal quarters, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. The palace was beautiful, beyond description, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal and gardens that defied the laws of physics. But what struck him most was how lonely it all felt. Do you ever get tired of being perfect all the time? He asked Queen Zara one evening as they shared dinner in her private chambers. She paused, a piece of fruit halfway to her lips. What do you mean everyone expects you to have all the answers? To never make mistakes? To always know what to do? David gestured around the grand room. This place is beautiful, but it's like living in a museum. Everything is so formal, so controlled. I have been trained since birth to be what my people need, she said quietly. Personal desires are not important. But what do you want? David pressed. Not as a queen, but as a person. What makes you happy? She was quiet for so long that David thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to walk in a garden without guards, watching my every step. I want to read a book without it being a political statement. I want to laugh without worrying about whether it sounds regal enough. She looked at him with those incredible eyes. I want to have a conversation with someone who sees me as more than just a title. I see you, David said, and meant it. That night, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained began to crumble.
Ow.
David found himself staying up late, talking with Zara about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, about the pressure of being groomed for leadership from the age of 5. He told her about Earth, about the simple pleasures of rain and music and lazy Sunday mornings. Your species is so different from mine, she said one night as they walked through her private garden. You value individual happiness. We value collective harmony. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to live for myself instead of for my people. You can do both, David said. A happy leader makes better decisions than a miserable one. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Is that what? You think I am? Miserable? David looked at her carefully. In the soft light of the garden, she looked younger, more vulnerable. I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. But I also think you're carrying a weight that no one should have to bear alone. I am not alone, she said. I have advisors, generals, an entire government. But do you have friends? People who care about you, not your position. The question seemed to hit her harder than he expected. Her composure cracked, and for a moment she looked almost fragile. No, she admitted. I do not. Well, David said, stepping closer, you do now. The kiss happened so naturally that neither of them saw it coming. One moment they were standing apart, the next they were in each other's arms. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Then it deepened, and David felt that strange tingling sensation again, stronger this time. It was as if some invisible connection was forming between them, something that went beyond physical attraction. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "This is dangerous," Zara whispered. "I know," David replied, but he didn't. "Step away from her. If my council finds out that our marriage has become real, they will see it as weakness. If your government discovers that I have genuine feelings for you, they will question your loyalty." "Let them question," David said. "I know where my loyalty lies," but their newfound happiness was short-lived. The next morning, David received an urgent message from Earth. A new ambassador was being sent to replace him, with orders to bring him home immediately. The message was clear. His superiors believed he had been compromised. "They think I've been brainwashed," David told Zara as they read the message together. "They want me back for debriefing and reassignment. Will you go?" she asked, and he could hear the careful neutrality in her voice. "Do you want me to? What I want is not relevant. You have duties to your people, just as I have duties to mine." David studied her face, seeing the mask of royal composure sliding back into place. "That's not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you as a queen." "Then don't answer as a queen," David said. "Answer as Zara, as the woman who grows earth flowers in alien soil and stays up late reading poetry." "What do you want?" The mask cracked again, and he saw the real woman underneath. "I want you to stay. But I cannot ask you to choose between me and your world. What if I've already chosen?" Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Security forces rushed through the corridors, and General Thane appeared at the door to the garden. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice cold and formal, "we have a situation. There has been a military uprising in the outer sectors. Several ships have declared their intention to remove you from power." David felt his blood run cold. "A coup?" "It appears so," Thane replied, his eyes never leaving David's face. "They claim that your emotional attachment to the human has made you unfit to rule. They demand that you annul the marriage and exile him immediately." David saw the choice laid out before him clearly. He could return to Earth as ordered, leaving Zara to face the crisis alone. Or he could stay and help her fight, knowing that it would make him a traitor in the eyes of his own people. "I need to coordinate our defense," Zara said, her voice steady, despite the chaos around them. "David, you should—" "I'm staying," he said firmly. "You cannot. If you involve yourself in our internal politics, Earth will disown you. You will have no home to return to." "Then I'll make a new home," David said, taking her hands in his. "I told you I've already chosen. I meant it." The look in her eyes was worth every bridge he was burning. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." General Thane's expression grew even colder. "How touching. I hope your human romantic notions will be enough to stop the rebel fleet." "They might not be," David said, turning to face the general. "But I know something about human military tactics that your rebels don't expect. If you're willing to listen, I might be able to help." For the first time, Thane looked genuinely surprised. "You would fight against your own species?" "I would fight for the woman I love," David said simply, "and for the peace we've built together." The next few hours were a blur of activity. David found himself in the palace war room, sharing everything he knew about human battle strategies with Zara's military advisors. It felt strange to be using his knowledge against human-built ships, but these weren't really human forces anymore. They were rebels who had stolen Earth technology and were using it to threaten the peace. When the battle finally came, it was brief but decisive. The rebels had expected traditional Zephyrian tactics, but David's unconventional strategies caught them off guard. The coup was crushed, but the victory came at a cost. "Earth has officially declared you a traitor," Lieutenant Kim reported over a secure channel. "Your citizenship has been revoked. You're on your own now." David felt a moment of sadness for the life he was leaving behind, but when he looked at Zara, he knew he had made the right choice. She was looking at him with an expression of wonder and gratitude that made his heart race. "You gave up everything for me," she said quietly. "I gave up my past for our future," he replied. "That's not the same thing." But even as they celebrated, Their victory, David knew that their real challenges were just beginning. Their love was no longer a secret, and that made them both vulnerable to enemies who would use their feelings against them. The fake marriage was over. The real one was just beginning. 2 years had passed since David chose to stay on Luminara, and their love had grown stronger with each passing day. But love, as they were learning, came with a price that neither of them had fully understood. The palace felt different now. Where once there had been cautious acceptance of their unusual marriage, now there was whispered tension. David could feel the stares of the Zephyrian nobles when he walked through the halls. They weren't hostile exactly, but they weren't welcoming either. "The Council of Elders has requested another meeting," Queen Zara announced during breakfast, her voice carefully neutral. David had learned to read the subtle signs of her stress, the way she held her shoulders just a little too straight. The slight tension around her eyes. "About what this time?" David asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The succession," she said simply. It was the elephant in the room that they had been avoiding for months. Zephyrian law required the royal line to continue, but human and Zephyrian biology were incompatible. They couldn't have children together, at least not naturally. And the nobles were growing impatient. "They want me to take a Zephyrian consort," Zara continued, not meeting his eyes. "Someone who could provide an heir." David felt his stomach drop. "And what did you tell them?" "That I would consider their recommendations," she said finally. Looking at him, "It does not mean I will act on them." But David could see the doubt in her eyes. The weight of an entire empire's future was pressing down on her shoulders, and she was struggling under the burden. The meeting with the Council of Elders was even worse than David had anticipated. The great hall was filled with ancient Zephyrians whose crystalline features seemed to glow with disapproval. They spoke in formal, old-fashioned language that made their meaning clear without being directly insulting. "Your Majesty," Elder Corinth began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "the Empire requires stability. The people need to know that their future is secure." "The people are prosperous and at peace," Zara replied. "Is that not security enough?" "Peace can be broken," another elder interjected. "Prosperity can be lost. But the royal bloodline must continue. It is the foundation upon which everything else stands." Dave sat quietly in his designated chair, feeling like an intruder in his own life. These beings were discussing his wife's future as if he weren't even there. "There are options," Elder Corinth continued. "Modern science offers possibilities that our ancestors could not have imagined. Genetic engineering, artificial enhancement, hybrid creation could find a way to blend human and Zephyrian traits. You're talking about creating a child in a laboratory," David said, speaking for the first time. "Like some kind of experiment. We're talking about ensuring the survival of our species," Elder Corinth replied coldly. "Something that transcends personal comfort." After the meeting, David and Zara walked through the palace gardens in silence. The earth flowers she had planted were blooming beautifully, but even their beauty couldn't lift the heaviness between them. "I won't do it," Zara said finally. "I won't create a child just to satisfy political requirements." "But what if you're wrong?" David asked. "What if the Empire really does need an heir to remain stable? And we will find another way," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The pressure continued to build over the following weeks. Reports came in from the outer sectors of the Empire, where some governors were beginning to question the Queen's leadership. Nothing direct, nothing treasonous, but enough to make it clear that the succession issue was becoming a real problem. Meanwhile, David received his own unwelcome news. Earth's new government had decided to cut all ties with the Zephyrian Empire. The peace treaty was being officially terminated, and a new ambassador was being sent to negotiate Earth's withdrawal from all joint projects. "They're blaming our relationship for the breakdown in relations," David told Zara after reading the latest diplomatic cables. "They say I've been compromised, and that any agreements made through me are invalid. They are looking for an excuse to end the alliance," Zara said. "Your government never fully trusted the peace." "My former government," David corrected. "They're not my people anymore." But even as he said it, David felt a pang of loss. He had given up his entire world for love, and now that world was rejecting everything he had worked to build. The situation reached a crisis point when General Thane requested a private meeting with both of them. The general's scarred face was even more serious than usual as he laid out intelligence reports on the conference table. "There are 3 separate rebel groups forming," he said without preamble. "One wants to restore the old ways and eliminate all human influence. Another wants to depose the queen and install a military government. The third wants to fragment the empire entirely." "Oh, and what do they all have in common?" Zara asked. "They all see your marriage as the symbol of everything wrong with the current system," Thane replied. "They believe that your emotional attachment to the human has made you weak and ineffective." David felt anger rising in his chest. "So what are you suggesting, that I leave?" "I am suggesting that you both face reality," Thane said. "This empire is heading towards civil war. The succession crisis is just the beginning. Unless you can find a way to address both the political and personal aspects of your situation, everything you have built will collapse." That night, David and Zara sat in their private chambers, surrounded by ancient texts and modern scientific reports. They had been researching every possible solution to their dilemma, but nothing seemed adequate. "There is one option we haven't fully explored," Zara said quietly, pointing to a passage in one of the oldest books, "The Joining of Souls." David read the text carefully. It was written in archaic Zephyrian, but the translation was clear enough. It says this ritual would literally bind our life forces together. We would become 2 parts of a single being. "Yes," Zara said. "It would create a new form of consciousness, one that could potentially reproduce in ways that neither of our species can alone, but it would also mean it could never be separated," David finished. "If one of us dies, the other dies too. And we would no longer be fully human or fully Zephyrian. We would be something new, something that has never existed before." David studied the ancient text more carefully. According to the writings, the ritual had been performed only once in Zephyrian history, thousands of years ago during a crisis that threatened their entire civilization. The results had been so profound that it had become the stuff of legend. "The joined beings became the founders of modern Zephyrian society," Zara explained. "They possessed abilities that neither species had individually. They could see connections that others missed, solve problems that seemed impossible. But they also gave up their individual identities," David said. "It became something else entirely," Zara agreed. "The question is whether we are willing to make that sacrifice." They spent the next few days in deep discussion about the ritual. It would solve many problems: the succession crisis, the political instability, the questions about their compatibility. But it would also mean giving up their humanity and her Zephyrian heritage to become something unprecedented. "If we do this," David said, "there's no going back. It won't be David and Zara anymore. We'll be something new." "Perhaps that is what both our species need," Zara replied. "Not a human leader or a Zephyrian leader, but something that bridges both worlds completely." As they prepared to make their decision, news arrived that forced their hand. The rebel fleets were mobilizing, and Earth's new government was secretly providing them with weapons and intelligence. The peace they had fought so hard to preserve was about to shatter completely. "They're using our love against us," David said, reading the latest intelligence reports. "Both sides see our relationship as weakness, and they're exploiting it." "Then perhaps it is time to show them what our love can really accomplish," Zara said, her voice filled with determination. They stood together in the crystal chamber where they had first been married, looking at the ancient altar where the joining of souls ritual would take place. It was a moment of perfect clarity and perfect terror. "Are you ready?" Zara asked. David took her hand, feeling the familiar tingle of connection that had been growing stronger between them over the months. "I've been ready since the moment I chose to stay." The ritual would begin at dawn, and by sunset, David Rodriguez and Queen Zara would cease to exist as separate beings. In their place would be something new, something that could either save both their civilizations or doom them to destruction. But as David looked into Zara's eyes, he knew they were making the right choice. Their love had already transformed them both. It was time to let it transform their worlds. The morning of the joining of souls ritual arrived with an unusual stillness. David stood at the window of their chambers, watching the twin suns of Luminara rise over the crystal spires of the capital city. In a few hours, he would no longer be human. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, he felt a strange sense of peace. "Second thoughts?" Zara asked, joining him at the window. She was already dressed in the ceremonial robes required for the ritual, flowing garments that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "No," David said, and he meant it. "Just thinking about how far we've come. A few years ago, I was just a soldier following orders. Now I'm about to become something that has never existed before. Do you regret any of it?" David turned to look at her, this incredible woman who had changed his entire world. "The only thing I regret is that it took a war to bring us together." The ritual chamber was filled with representatives from both species. Human diplomats sat alongside Zephyrian nobles, many of them looking uncomfortable with the unprecedented event they were about to witness. Even General Thane was there, his usually stern expression softened by something that might have been respect. "Are you certain about this?" Elder Corinth asked one final time. "The ritual cannot be undone. Once your souls are joined, you will be forever changed." "We understand," Zara replied. "We have made our choice." Ancient altar in the center of the chamber pulsed with energy as the ceremonial crystals were activated. David felt the familiar tingling sensation that always accompanied his connection to Zara, but this time it was stronger, more intense. The air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. The joining of souls is not merely a union of two beings, the elder priest intoned in the ancient language. It is the birth of something new, something that bridges worlds and transcends the limitations of singular existence. As the ritual began, David felt his consciousness expanding. At first, it was like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, feeling the pull of infinite depths. Then, suddenly, he was diving in, his awareness merging with Zara's in ways that defied description. He could feel her memories flowing through him, her lonely childhood in the palace, the weight of responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders from birth, the fear she had felt when she first proposed their marriage. But he could also feel her joy, her love for him, her hope for their future. At the same time, he sensed her experiencing his own memories, his childhood on Earth, his military training, the moment he had first seen her on the view screen, and felt something stir in his heart. She was living through his decision to stay, feeling the weight of sacrifice he had made for love. The process was beautiful and terrifying. David felt his individual identity beginning to dissolve, but instead of loss, he experienced expansion. He was becoming more than he had ever been alone. "Don't fight it," Zara's voice whispered in his mind, though he wasn't sure if she had spoken aloud or if he was hearing her thoughts directly. "Let go. Trust the process." As the ritual reached its peak, something extraordinary happened. The joined consciousness that David and Zara were becoming began to generate new abilities. They could perceive energy patterns that neither species had ever seen before. They could understand the fundamental connections between all living things. Most remarkably, they could feel the life force of every person in the chamber, sensing their hopes, fears, and dreams. When the transformation was complete, the being that had once been David Rodriguez and Queen Zara opened their eyes. They were still recognizably themselves, but something fundamental had changed. They moved with perfect synchronization, spoke with one voice, and radiated an energy that made everyone in the chamber feel peaceful and hopeful. "We are no longer two," they said, their voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies both human and Zephyrian ears could perceive. "We are one, and we are more." The first test of their new existence came immediately. News arrived that the rebel fleets had launched their attack, expecting to find a weakened empire torn apart by succession disputes. Instead, they found something they had never anticipated: the joined consciousness that David and Zara had become possessed, strategic abilities that surpassed anything either species had achieved individually. They could process information at incredible speeds, seeing patterns and connections that revealed the rebels' plans before they could be executed. More importantly, they could communicate with both human and Zephyrian forces simultaneously, coordinating a defense that was perfectly synchronized. But their greatest weapon wasn't military. It was inspirational. When the rebel forces saw what the joining ritual had created, many of them simply stopped fighting. They had been rebelling against what they saw as weakness, but this new being represented strength of a kind they had never imagined. You see, the joined consciousness broadcast to both fleets. This is what we can become when we choose unity over division, love over fear. We are not asking you to surrender your identity. We're asking you to expand it. The rebellion collapsed within hours. More importantly, the peace between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire was not only restored, but strengthened. The new being that David and Zara had become served as a living bridge between the two civilizations. Proof that cooperation was not only possible, but transformative in the years that followed. The joined consciousness established new colonies where humans and Zephyrians lived and worked together. They developed technologies that neither species could have created alone, energy sources that seemed to tap into the fundamental forces of creation itself, medical treatments that could heal injuries that had previously been fatal, in communication, systems that allowed instant contact across vast distances. Most remarkably, they found a way to have children. The joined consciousness could create new life that combined the best traits of both species while adding something entirely new. These children were not quite human, not quite Zephyrian, but something wonderful that represented the future of both races. Are you happy? David asked Zara during one of their rare moments of individual consciousness. Even joined, they could sometimes separate their thoughts enough to speak to each other as they once had. I am complete, she replied. For the first time in my life, I am exactly who I was meant to be, even though we're no longer who we were. We are who we were, she said, and who we are becoming. We have not lost ourselves, we have found ourselves. Then, years after the joining ritual, David and Zara stood in their crystal garden, watching their children play. The flowers that bloomed there now were unlike anything that had existed before, combinations of earth and Zephyrian plants that created colors and fragrances that delighted both species. Do you ever miss it? One of their children asked. Being separate. The joined consciousness smiled, feeling the question through multiple layers of awareness. We miss the simplicity sometimes, they said, but we would not trade what we have. Become for what we were. Love is not about losing yourself in another person. It is about finding yourself by becoming more than you ever thought possible. As the twin suns set over Luminara, casting the sky in shades of gold and purple that human eyes had never seen before the joining, David and Zara felt a deep satisfaction. They had saved both their peoples, but more than that, they had proven that love could literally transform the universe. The fake marriage that had begun as a desperate political gambit had become something beyond their wildest dreams. They had found not just love, but purpose, meaning, and a future that stretched out before them like an infinite garden of possibilities. In the end, the greatest victory was not defeating their enemies or saving their civilizations. It was discovering that when two people choose to become one, they don't lose themselves. They find out who they were always meant to be.